The Valorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for more than 50,000 years, and in all that time, they had never once been surprised by a primitive species. At least not until they discovered humanity. Ambassador Kethalar stood on the bridge of his magnificent diplomatic vessel, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. It was such an ordinary world, he thought, floating in an ordinary solar system at the edge of an ordinary spiral arm. There was nothing special about it at all. "Ambassador, we are receiving radio signals from the surface," his assistant reported. They appear to be broadcasting in hundreds of different languages. Kethalar's crystalline body shimmered with mild interest. Radio signals were the mark of a civilization just beginning to reach for the stars. They were babies, really, taking their first steps into a universe they could not possibly understand. He had seen this 1,000 times before, and he knew exactly how it would go. The Valorian Empire had a system, you see. Whenever they discovered a new species, they would descend from the heavens with gifts beyond imagination. They would offer technology and medicine and power. They would offer membership in the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. And every single time, without exception, the primitive species would fall to their knees in gratitude. It was the perfect system. The Empire gave freely, and in return, they received loyalty. Species that accepted Valorian gifts became dependent on Valorian generosity. They became part of the great machine, working and serving and never causing trouble. It had worked for 50,000 years, and Kethalar saw no reason why it would not work again. The diplomatic vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere in the year 2157, broadcasting messages of peace in every human language. It was an impressive ship, larger than any aircraft carrier, covered in gold and precious metals that sparkled in the sunlight. The humans would be amazed. Kethalar was certain. They would be honored beyond measure. He was right about one thing. The humans were definitely amazed. Billions of people around the world stopped what they were doing and stared at the sky. News networks broadcast the arrival on every channel. World leaders gathered in emergency sessions to discuss what this meant for humanity. Kethalar descended from his ship with great ceremony, his crystalline form catching the light in dazzling patterns. He wore ceremonial silks that were worth more than the entire economic output of Earth. Behind him came servants carrying chests filled with wonders. Medical devices that could cure any disease. Energy crystals that could power entire cities. Data tablets containing the collected knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. The United Earth Council had sent their finest representatives to meet him. Secretary General Amara Okancho stood at the front, a tall woman with gray hair and steady eyes. She did not fall to her knees. She did not weep with joy. She simply extended her hand in greeting and said, "Welcome to Earth." Kethalar found this slightly odd, but he proceeded with the standard offering anyway. He had given this speech countless times, and he knew it by heart. "People of Earth," he began, his voice booming across the assembly hall, "the Valorian Empire has watched your species for many years. We have seen your struggles and your suffering. We have seen your wars and your diseases and your poverty, and we have come to offer you salvation." He gestured to the chest behind him, and his servants opened them to reveal the treasures within. Gasps echoed through the hall as humans saw technology beyond their wildest dreams. "We offer you immortality treatments that will allow your people to live for thousands of years. We offer you faster-than-light travel that will open the entire galaxy to exploration. We offer you unlimited clean energy that will end your dependence on primitive fuels. And we offer you a seat on the Galactic Council, where your voice will be heard among the stars." Kethalar spread his arms wide, waiting for the tears and the gratitude and the promises of eternal loyalty. This was always his favorite part. Secretary General Okanko looked at the treasures, then looked at her fellow council members. They exchanged glances that Kethalar could not read. There were whispered conversations in languages his translator could not quite catch. And then, to his absolute shock, Okonkwo turned back to him with a polite smile. "Ambassador Kethalar, we are honored by your visit and grateful for your generous offer. However, the United Earth Council will need time to deliberate. Please allow us 6 hours to discuss this matter." 6 hours. Kethalar could not believe it. Other species had accepted within minutes. Some had accepted before he even finished speaking. But he was a patient being, and he agreed to wait. Those 6 hours were the longest of his very long life. He paced the halls of the meeting facility, his crystalline form flickering with anxiety. His advisors assured him that everything was fine. The humans were simply being thorough, they said. Primitive species often needed time to process such overwhelming generosity. When the doors finally opened and Okonkwo emerged, Kethalar rushed forward eagerly. He could already imagine reporting this success to the Emperor. Another species brought into the fold, another world added to the Empire's glory. "Ambassador," Okonkwo said, her voice calm and steady, "the United Earth Council has reached a decision." "Wonderful," Kethalar replied. "I am prepared to begin the integration process immediately. There are documents to sign and ceremonies to perform, and we respectfully decline," Okonkwo interrupted. The words hit Kethalar like a physical blow. His translator matrix sparked and glitched. Surely there had been some mistake. Surely his equipment was malfunctioning. "I am sorry," he said slowly. "My translator may have erred." "Could you repeat that?" "We decline your offer," Okonkwo said clearly. "All of it. The immortality treatments, the technology, the council seat. We are grateful for your generosity, but we must refuse." Kethalar stood frozen, his brilliant mind struggling to process information that simply did not compute. In 50,000 years, no species had ever refused. It was unthinkable. It was impossible. It was absolutely insane. "Perhaps you do not understand," he said, fighting to keep his voice calm. "We are offering you everything. We are offering you power beyond imagination. We are offering you a place among the stars. Why would you possibly refuse?" Okonkwo's smile remained steady, but her eyes held something Kethalar could not identify. Was it pride, perhaps, or determination, or something else entirely? "We understand perfectly," she said. "And we are grateful, truly. But humanity must find its own way. We must build our own future with our own hands. That is who we are." Kethalar returned to his ship in a daze, his mind spinning with questions he could not answer. He sent his report to the Imperial Council with trembling hands, knowing they would not believe him. He barely believed it himself. The humans had refused. They had looked at paradise and said no. They had been offered everything and wanted nothing. It was the strangest thing that had happened in the history of the Valorian Empire. And somewhere deep in his ancient consciousness, Kethalar felt the first stirrings of something he had not experienced in millennia. It took him a long time to identify the emotion, but when he finally did, it chilled him to his very core. It was fear. The news of humanity's refusal spread through the Valorian Empire like wildfire, and no one could believe it. Ambassadors in distant star systems demanded confirmation. Scientists insisted that the report must be wrong. Politicians declared that there had to be some misunderstanding. The Imperial Council gathered in the Great Chamber on the Throne World, a room so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. These were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, rulers of 12,000 star systems, and they were completely confused. "It is impossible," High Arbiter Zinthal declared, her psychic emanations rippling through the chamber. "No species has ever refused a standard offering." Kethalar must have made an error in his presentation. "I made no error," Kethalar replied, his crystalline form still flickering with distress. "I delivered the offering exactly as I have done hundreds of times before. They simply said no. Then we must try again, said Grand Admiral Vexari, a fearsome warrior whose scales gleamed like polished armor. Perhaps they need more incentive. Perhaps we should show them what happens to species that refuse our generosity. That would be premature. Emperor Thalagorm spoke from his throne at the center of the chamber. He was ancient beyond measure, his body more energy than matter, his mind containing memories of ages long forgotten. Let us first attempt to understand these humans. Send more ambassadors. Offer them more. There must be something they want, and so began the Decade of Offers, a period that would go down in galactic history as the most confusing diplomatic effort ever attempted. The first new ambassador arrived on Earth 6 months after Cathalor's failure. She was a being of pure light named Solara, known throughout the Empire for her persuasive abilities. She had convinced rebel systems to surrender with nothing but words. Surely she could convince these primitive humans to accept paradise. We understand your hesitation, Solara said to the new United Earth Council, her light pulsing with warmth and comfort. Change can be frightening, but let us start small. Allow us to cure your diseases. Millions of your people suffer needlessly from illnesses we eliminated millennia ago. Let us help them. The council deliberated for 3 hours this time, and their answer was the same. They declined. We are working on our own cures, Secretary General Chen Wei explained. He had replaced Okonkwo after her retirement, and he spoke with the same quiet confidence. We have made great progress in cancer research and genetic therapy. We prefer to continue on our own path. Solara returned to the Empire in failure, her light dimmed by confusion. The second ambassador was a master of technology named Vorthan, whose people had built the first faster-than-light engines. He came to Earth with blueprints and prototypes and promises of interstellar travel. Your generation ships crawl through space at a fraction of light speed, Vorthan explained, his mechanical voice buzzing with enthusiasm. It would take your people thousands of years to reach even the nearest stars. Let us give you engines that can cross the galaxy in days. Let us open the universe to humanity. Chen Wei smiled and shook his head. We have our own scientists working on propulsion technology. They believe they are close to a breakthrough. We would prefer to discover these secrets ourselves. Vorthan could not understand. Why would anyone choose to struggle when the answers were freely available? It was like watching someone drown while refusing a rope. It made no sense at all. The third ambassador was a philosopher named Morthuk, who believed that the humans simply did not understand what they were rejecting. He came with holographic presentations showing the wonders of the Empire. He showed them paradise worlds where citizens lived in perfect comfort. He showed them the great libraries containing all knowledge. He showed them the throne world itself, a planet transformed into a work of art. This could all be yours, Morthuk said, his multiple arms gesturing at the magnificent images. You could walk among the stars tomorrow. You could live forever. You could know everything. Why do you refuse? Because we would not have earned it, Chen Wei replied. Those achievements belong to your people, not to ours. We want to build our own paradise, create our own wonders, discover our own truths. Accepting your gifts would make us dependent. We would lose something essential about ourselves. Morthuk left Earth more confused than when he arrived. He spent the rest of his long life trying to understand humanity, and he never quite succeeded. Year after year, the ambassadors came. They offered to terraform Mars into a garden world. The humans said they would do it themselves. They offered to build orbital habitats that could house billions. The humans said they preferred their own designs. They offered to share the secrets of anti-gravity and force fields and matter replication. The humans said thank you, but no. Finally, after 10 years of failures, High Arbiter Zintal made a decision that shocked the entire empire. She would go to Earth herself. She would make an offer so generous that no species could possibly refuse. Zinthal had not left a throne world in 6 centuries. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, a founding member of the Empire, a living legend. Her psychic powers were so vast that she could read minds across solar systems. When she announced her intention to visit Earth, every news network in the Empire broadcast the story. Her ship was not merely impressive. It was a work of art that made Kethal's vessel look like a primitive boat. It was the size of a small moon, covered in crystals that sang with energy. It descended through Earth's atmosphere like a god coming down from heaven. Zinthal stood before the United Earth Council, and the power radiating from her ancient form made the humans tremble. This was a being who had witnessed the birth of civilizations. This was a being who had negotiated with species that no longer existed. This was a being who had never, in all her long existence, failed to get what she wanted. Humanity. She spoke directly into their minds, her voice resonating with millennia of authority. I come to offer you something that has never been offered to any species in the history of the Valorian Empire. I offer you equal standing with the founding races. I offer you immediate elevation from primitive newcomers to galactic elite. You would not be servants or members or allies. You would be partners, equal in every way. The council members looked at each other with wide eyes. Even Chen Wei seemed momentarily stunned. This was beyond anything they could have imagined. This was power and prestige handed to them on a golden platter. Zinthal smiled inwardly, certain that she had finally found the key. No species could resist such an offer. It was simply too good to refuse. Chen Wei leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face thoughtful. "High Arbiter," he said slowly, "why do you want us so badly? What is it about humanity that interests the Empire so much?" The question caught Zinthal off guard. "We want to help you," she replied. "We want to share our prosperity with—" "No," Chen Wei interrupted, and his boldness made the other council members gasp. "You have helped thousands of species. What makes us different? Why are you willing to offer us equality when you have never offered it to anyone else?" Zinthal's psychic emanations flickered with something she had not felt in centuries. It was frustration, and beneath that, something darker. It was the beginning of fear. "What do you want?" she demanded, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic calm. "Tell me what you want, and I will give it to you. Anything, everything. Just name your price." Chen Wei stood up from his chair and looked the ancient being directly in the eye. His voice was steady, his words simple and clear. "We want to earn it ourselves." Zinthal's mind could not process the response. Every species sought shortcuts. Every species craved power. The humans were either lying or insane. And as she returned to her ship in defeated silence, she began to suspect it might be the latter. After High Arbiter Zinthal's failure, the Imperial Council decided on a new approach. If they could not convince humanity to accept their gifts, they would study humanity instead. They would learn everything about these strange beings who refused. Paradise. They would find their weakness. Chief Analyst Morvith was assigned to lead the investigation. She was a being of pure intellect, her brain enhanced by centuries of technological upgrades. She had analyzed hundreds of species, predicting their behavior with perfect accuracy. Humanity would be just another puzzle to solve, she thought. She was very, very wrong. For 20 years, Morvith and her team observed Earth from hidden stations scattered throughout the solar system. They intercepted communications, monitored broadcasts, and collected every piece of data they could find. And the more they learned, the more disturbed they became. The first report came after 2 years of observation. And it was not what the Imperial Council wanted to hear. "The humans are advancing," Morvith announced to the assembled rulers. They achieved controlled fusion power approximately 18 months ago. Their energy problems are being solved without our help, the council members murmured uneasily. Fusion power usually took primitive species centuries to develop. Humanity had done it in decades. This was faster than expected. 5 years later. Who fives them there? The reports became even more alarming. Their generation ships are improving, Morvith explained, displaying holographic images of human spacecraft. Their propulsion systems are becoming more efficient. They have established permanent colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They are expanding without our technology. That is impossible. Grand Admiral Vexari growled. They should be centuries away from such achievements, and yet here they are, Morvith replied, her voice tinged with something that sounded almost like admiration. They work with a determination I have never seen in any species. They fail constantly, but they never give up. Every setback only seems to make them try harder. The council demanded more information, and Morvith dove deeper into human history. What she found there changed everything. Their past is remarkable, she reported during her next presentation. They have survived catastrophes that would have destroyed most species. They have endured wars that killed millions of their own kind. They have faced plagues and famines and natural disasters. And every single time, they have rebuilt. She displayed images from human history. Cities destroyed by bombs that rose from the ashes more beautiful than before. Populations devastated by disease that developed vaccines and medicines. Civilizations that collapsed and reformed into something stronger. It was a pattern of destruction and rebirth that repeated throughout their entire existence. They are addicted to adversity. Morvith concluded, her enhanced brain struggling to process information that defied all logic. They do not merely tolerate hardship, they seem to require it. Struggle makes them stronger. Comfort makes them weak. They understand this about themselves, and that is why they refuse our gifts. Emperor Thalagorum leaned forward on his throne, his ancient form crackling with energy. Explain, he commanded. When we give technology to other species, they become dependent on us, Morvith said. They stop innovating. They stop struggling. They become comfortable. Over time, they lose the ability to solve problems on their own. They become loyal because they need us. She paused, her multiple eyes blinking with discomfort. But the humans have seen through our strategy. They know that accepting our gifts would make them dependent. They know that taking shortcuts would weaken them in the long run. So they refuse. Not because they are stupid, but because they are terrifyingly wise. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 50,000 years, the Empire had controlled other species by making them dependent. But you cannot make a species dependent if they refuse your gifts. You cannot control beings who would rather struggle than accept easy answers. There is more. Morvith continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Our scientists have intercepted research papers from human universities. They are independently developing theories of faster-than-light travel. Their mathematics is different from ours. Their approach is unique, but the results are undeniable. They may achieve FTL capability within the century. Gasps echoed through the chamber. FTL technology was the crown jewel of Valorian science. It had taken the Empire millennia to develop, and these primitive humans were figuring it out on their own in mere decades. How is this possible? High Arbiter Zinthal demanded. They have no teachers, no guides, no accumulated knowledge. How can they advance so quickly? Because they are not burdened by tradition, Morvith answered. Our science has not changed significantly in 20,000 years. We discovered what worked and stopped, looking for alternatives. But the humans have no established doctrines to limit them. They try everything, fail often, and learn from every mistake. Their chaos produces innovation at a rate we cannot match. The council members looked at each other with growing alarm. They had built an empire on the assumption that all beings wanted comfort and ease. They had controlled thousands of species by providing exactly that. But humanity was different. Humanity was dangerous. "What do you recommend?" the Emperor asked. Morvith hesitated. She had analyzed the situation from every angle, and all her conclusions pointed to the same disturbing truth. "If we cannot make them dependent," she finally said, "then we must either destroy them or learn to live with an equal. There is no middle ground with beings like these." Grand Admiral Vexari rose from her seat, her scales bristling with aggression. "Then we destroy them," she declared. "The Empire has crushed rebellions before. We have the largest military force in the galaxy. These humans are nothing compared to our power. Are you certain?" Morvith asked quietly. "They have already shown they would rather die than surrender their independence. If we attack them, they will fight. They will fight with every weapon they can build, every soldier they can find, every trick they can imagine. And even if we win, we will inherit nothing but ash and hatred." The debate raged for hours, then days, then weeks. Some wanted immediate military action. Others counseled patience. Still others suggested completely ignoring humanity and hoping they would eventually change their minds. Finally, Emperor Thalagorum spoke the words that everyone had been avoiding. "If they will not accept our friendship," he said, his ancient voice heavy with resignation, "then perhaps they should understand what it means to be our enemy. Prepare the fleet." The decision had been made. The Empire would show humanity the price of rejection. They would demonstrate the overwhelming power that had conquered 12,000 star systems. And surely, faced with absolute destruction, even these stubborn beings would finally submit. But deep in her analytical mind, Morvith knew the truth. She had studied humanity too long to believe that threats would work. These were beings who had stared into the void countless times and refused to blink. These were beings who treated impossible odds as merely another challenge to overcome. She said nothing as the council adjourned, but she began quietly making contingency plans, because she suspected that what came next would change the Empire forever, and not in the way anyone expected. The Imperial Armada arrived in Earth's solar system on a cold morning in December, and the sight of it made grown men weep with terror. 10,000 warships stretched across the void like a wall of death. Each vessel was armed with weapons that could crack planets. Together, they represented more firepower than humanity had produced in its entire history. Grand Admiral Vexari stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the small blue world that had caused so much trouble. It was such an insignificant planet, she thought. Such an insignificant species. They would learn their place soon enough. "Broadcast the ultimatum on all frequencies," she commanded. Her message echoed across the solar system, reaching every human ear. "People of Earth, I am Grand Admiral Vexari of the Valorian Imperial Fleet. Your government has repeatedly rejected the generous offers of the Valorian Empire. This rejection ends today. You have 12 hours to accept full integration into the Empire. If you refuse, we will destroy your civilization completely. There will be no negotiation, no second chances, no mercy. Choose wisely." The message ended, and the waiting began. Surely, Vexari thought, faced with certain destruction, the humans would finally submit. No species could look at 10,000 warships and choose death. It defied all logic. But the humans were about to teach the Empire something about logic. The first response came not from any government, but from a retired soldier in Texas. His name was James Cooper, and he was 87 years old. He had fought in 3 wars and buried 2 wives. And when he heard the ultimatum, he walked to his local recruitment center and demanded a weapon. "You are too old," the officer told him. "Then give me a wheelchair and a rifle," Cooper replied. "I will fight sitting down if I have to. Nobody threatens my grandchildren." His story spread across the internet in minutes, and something remarkable began to happen. Recruitment centers around the world were suddenly overwhelmed. Not just soldiers came, but teachers and doctors and farmers. Teenagers who had never held a weapon stood in line next to grandparents who remembered ancient wars. Rich and poor, young and old, every nation and every culture. They all wanted to fight. Secretary General Maya Chun, granddaughter of Chen Wei, watched the reports in amazement. "They are not afraid," she whispered. "They are angry." Within hours, humanity began revealing secrets that even the Empire's spies had not discovered. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites transformed into weapon stations, bristling with missiles and lasers. Asteroid mining facilities disgorged swarms of combat drones that had been hidden in plain sight. The generation ship that was crawling toward Alpha Centauri reversed course and began heading home, its massive hull covered in improvised weapons. Earth's defenses were primitive compared to the Imperial fleet, of course. They had no shields, no particle cannons, no faster-than-light torpedoes. But they had something the Empire had not expected. They had numbers that defied comprehension. Millions of small craft launched from every nation. They were shuttles and satellites and cargo ships, all hastily converted into kamikaze weapons. They were suicide drones built by engineers in their garages. They were rockets and missiles and anything else that could fly and explode. Humanity was throwing everything it had into the fight, holding nothing back. Grand Admiral Vesari watched the chaos unfold with growing unease. Her tactical displays showed human vessels swarming toward the fleet like angry insects. There were so many of them. Where had they all come from? "They cannot possibly win," her advisor noted. "Our shields will stop most of their weapons. Our guns will destroy them by the thousands." "I know," Vesari replied. "But they are coming anyway. Why would they fight a battle they cannot win?" The answer came in the form of a transmission from Secretary General Chun. Her face appeared on every screen in the Imperial fleet, and her voice was calm and clear. "Grand Admiral, I want you to understand something before this battle begins. We know we cannot defeat your fleet. We know that millions of our people will die today. And we are coming anyway." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of all human history. "You misunderstand us. You think we rejected your gifts because we are foolish. But we rejected them because accepting them would have made us less than what we are. We are what our struggles have made us. Every war we fought, every disease we conquered, every disaster we survived. These things are part of us. They made us strong. Take that away, and we are nothing." Vesari listened in silence, something cold forming in her chest. "If we surrender today," Chung continued, "we lose everything that makes us human. We become just another dependent species, waiting for handouts, forgetting how to solve our own problems. Our children would grow up soft and weak, knowing that anything difficult can be solved by asking the Empire for help. That is not a life. That is a slow death." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with determination. "So we choose a fast death instead. We choose to die on our feet rather than live on our knees. And I promise you, Grand Admiral, we will make you pay for every inch. You will win this battle, but you will never forget the price we made you pay." The transmission ended, and Vesari sat in stunned silence. Around her, officers waited for orders. The human swarm was getting closer. It was time to begin the slaughter. But the Admiral did not give the order. She thought about the 12,000 star systems under Imperial control. She thought about the thousands of species that had accepted Valorian gifts. They were comfortable and happy and peaceful. They were also stagnant. They had not produced a single meaningful innovation in centuries. They contributed nothing new to the empire. They simply existed. And then she thought about humanity. Primitive, stubborn, infuriating humanity. In just 30 years of independence, they had achieved fusion power, colonized planets, and nearly cracked faster-than-light travel. They were advancing faster than any species in recorded history. They were producing innovations that imperial scientists found genuinely interesting. If she destroyed them today, what would the empire gain? Nothing but ashes and an example. There would be no new ideas, no fresh perspectives, no independent minds. Humanity would be gone, and the universe would be a little bit smaller. "Admiral," her advisor prompted, "the human vessels are entering weapons range. Shall we open fire?" Vexari made her decision. "No," she said. "All ships, stand down. We are withdrawing from the system." The bridge erupted in confusion. "Admiral," the Emperor ordered. "The Emperor ordered me to secure humanity's compliance," Vexari interrupted. "Destroying them would not secure compliance. It would only prove that we are afraid of them. And I am beginning to think we should be." The Imperial Armada turned and began its long journey back to the throne world. Behind them, millions of human warriors watched in disbelief. They had been ready to die, and their enemies had simply left. Secretary General Chun wept with relief, but she understood what had really happened. This was not mercy. This was respect. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Valorian Empire had met a species they could not control. And everything was about to change. 50 years had passed since the Imperial Armada withdrew from Earth's solar system, and the galaxy had watched humanity with a mixture of fascination and fear. The small species that had rejected paradise was still out there, still struggling, still growing stronger. And now they were about to shock the universe once again. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto stood in the control room of the Prometheus research station, his hands trembling with excitement. Around him, hundreds of scientists and engineers stared at screens displaying data that should have been impossible. After decades of failures and setbacks and near disasters, they had finally done it. "All systems are green," his assistant reported. "The containment field is stable. The quantum matrix is aligned. We are ready for the test." Kenji took a deep breath and nodded. "Initiate the faster-than-light drive." The Prometheus 2 was a small ship, barely larger than a shuttle. It sat in the testing bay like a fragile egg, surrounded by monitoring equipment. But inside that tiny vessel was the culmination of humanity's greatest scientific effort, a device that could bend space itself. Energy flooded the containment field. The ship began to vibrate. And then, with a flash of light that made everyone shield their eyes, it vanished. For 3 agonizing seconds, the control room was silent. Had it worked? Had the ship survived? Had they finally achieved what the Empire had offered them so long ago? The answer came in the form of a transmission from the outer solar system. "Prometheus Control, this is Prometheus 2. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "We have successfully completed an FTL jump of approximately 40 astronomical units. All systems are functioning. The crew is healthy. I repeat, the test was successful." The control room exploded in cheers. Scientists hugged each other. Engineers wept openly. Decades of work had finally paid off. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel on their own terms, with their own science, through their own determination. News of the achievement spread across Earth within minutes, and the celebrations lasted for weeks. But humanity did not rest for long. Within 5 years, they had built a fleet of FT-LOL-capable vessels. Within 10 years, they had established colonies in 3 different star systems. And within 20 years, they were ready to take their place among the stars. The first human diplomatic mission to the Valorian throne world was not a humble petition for membership. It was a courtesy call between equals. Secretary General Yuki Tanaka stood at the head of the delegation. Her silver hair swept back from a face that radiated quiet confidence. Behind her were humanity's finest scientists, diplomats, and leaders. They had come not to beg, but to introduce themselves. Emperor Thalagorum received them in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who remembered the first rejection. The ancient being had witnessed countless events in his long existence, but few had surprised him as much as humanity's arrival. "Welcome to the throne world," he said, his energy form pulsing with curiosity. "You have come a long way since our first meeting." "We have," Tanaka replied with a small smile. "It took us longer than it would have with your help, but we got here eventually." The Emperor studied her with ancient eyes. "We offered you everything," he said, something like wonder in his resonant voice. "Immortality, technology, power. You refused it all. And now you have built something greater than anything we could have given you. We built something that is ours." Tanaka corrected gently. "The achievements belong to humanity. The struggles belong to humanity. The pride belongs to humanity. No one can ever take that from us." Around the throne room, Imperial advisors listened in uncomfortable silence. They had spent centuries managing dependent species who contributed nothing new to the Empire. They had grown comfortable with their position at the top of the galactic hierarchy. But humanity's arrival changed everything. Chief Analyst Morveth, now ancient herself, stepped forward to address the humans. "Your FDL technology is different from ours," she said. "Our scientists have studied your approach, and we must admit that it is in some way superior. Your ships are more efficient. Your range is greater. How did you achieve this?" Tanaka's smile widened. "We had no teachers to tell us what was impossible. We tried everything, including approaches your scientists rejected thousands of years ago. Some of our methods failed spectacularly, but others worked better than anyone expected. We learned by doing, not by following instructions." The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had not simply caught up with imperial science. In several fields, they had surpassed it. Their unique approach, unshackled by millennia of established doctrine, had produced innovations that the Empire had never conceived. "You offered us a ceiling," Tanaka continued, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We chose the sky." The words struck the assembled beings like physical blows. For 50,000 years, they had believed that their way was the only way. They had assumed that species given shortcuts would eventually reach the same destination. But humanity had proven that the journey mattered as much as the destination. In the weeks that followed, humanity's delegation met with representatives from hundreds of species. These were beings who had accepted imperial integration centuries ago, who had grown comfortable and dependent on Valorian generosity. They had not produced a single original idea in thousands of years. They had forgotten how to struggle, how to fail, how to grow. But now they watched humanity with new eyes. They asked dangerous questions that had not been spoken in millennia. If these primitive beings could achieve so much through struggle, what might they themselves have become if they had refused the easy path? The ripples spread across the galaxy like waves in a pond. On distant worlds, species began to remember what it felt like to solve problems without imperial help. They began to rediscover the satisfaction of earning achievements through their own effort. They began to understand what humanity had always known. The Valorian Empire had built its power on gifts that created dependence. For 50,000 years, this strategy had worked perfectly. But humanity had shown the galaxy that the greatest gift was not technology or immortality or power. The greatest gift was the freedom to struggle, to fail, to learn, and to earn. 1 year after humanity's arrival on the throne world, Emperor Thalagorum summoned Secretary General Tanaka to a private audience. They sat together in a garden of crystal flowers, two beings from vastly different worlds who had somehow found understanding. "You have changed everything," the Emperor said quietly. "Species that were content for millennia are now questioning their dependence on us. The empire I built is beginning to crumble. Are you angry?" Tanaka asked. The ancient being considered the question for a long moment. "No," he finally replied. "I think I am relieved. We built an empire of comfort and stagnation. You have reminded the galaxy that growth requires struggle. Perhaps it is time for something new." Tanaka nodded slowly. "Humanity has a saying," she said. "The measure of a species is not what it is given, but what it builds from nothing." The Emperor's form flickered with something that might have been amusement. Perhaps that should be taught in our schools, and it was. 50 years later, the saying appeared in textbooks across 12,000 star systems. Children of 100 species learned about the humans who had rejected paradise and built something better. They learned that struggle was not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, and at the center of that change stood humanity. Small, stubborn, impossible humanity. The species that had looked at the greatest empire in history and said one simple word that changed everything. "No."